This is FLOSS Weekly. I'm Doc Searls, and on this show, we ring in the new year with a roundtable of Jonathan Bennett, Katherine, Druckman, myself, and himself, Leo Laporte, who is fabulous, as we all know. It's a great show. We cover lots and lots of topics, and that is coming up next.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
This is FLOSS Weekly, episode 713, recorded Wednesday, January 4th, 2023. Let's put thoughts on the blockchain. This episode of FLOSS Weekly is brought to you by Fastmail. Reclaim your privacy, boost productivity, and make email yours with Fastmail. Try it free for 30 days at fastmail.com/twit. Fastmail is also giving TWiT listeners a 15% discount on the first year when you sign up today. And by Collide, that's Collide with a K. Collide is an endpoint security solution that gives IT teams a single dashboard for all devices, regardless of their operating system. Visit collide.com/floss to learn more and activate a free 14-day trial today. No credit card required. Hello again, everybody, everywhere, and welcome to the new year. I am Doc Searls. This is FLOSS Weekly, and I am joined today by a bunch of people who are appearing on the screen now. Jonathan Bennett, Katherine Druckman, and Leo himself, Laporte, who
former host of FLOSS Weekly.
Just got here.
A long time ago.
About 100 years ago.
Recruited me for this gig, which is I'm going in my third year now, I think, Leo.
Isn't that amazing how fast that goes? And we've been really thrilled. I started it and then brought on Chris DeBona, who was the open source guy at Google. Yeah. And then I got tired of it. Chris did it for a while, and we brought in Randall Schwartz, who hosted it for many years, I think almost a decade. And then about 3 years ago, I called on Mr. Searls, and what a good choice that was. And you dragged along Katherine and Jonathan with you, which was
I think Jonathan
brilliant.
Was already here.
It was brilliant.
I think Jonathan predates me.
Oh, Jonathan was filling in for Randall. That's right.
I did drag Katherine.
Yeah.
So
and Sean.
It doesn't show.
And Sean, yeah.
And Sean, Sean came from there. We're Linux Journal in exile. That's what this is.
Not so much in exile anymore. I mean, Linux is this is it. The year of the Linux desktop.
It's the 25th running year of the Linux desktop, I think.
Running in Docker.
How many covers did you do on the Linux Journal?
I have back here, right over there, there's a stack of Linux journals, and probably if I started flipping back through them, I'd probably find 5 of them at least.
Absolutely.
Something like that. But we have it. And so let's get into it. I'll start with Jonathan because he sent the most, I thought, the best prep on what and I'm not so crazy about it's sort of like what do we look forward to more than what just happened in the last year. There are too many retrospectives. So what's prospective or happening now that we have to live through?
Well, the big thing that's happening right now, do we want to talk about cryptocurrency right out the gate? Bitcoin
Sure.
and Ethereum and all of that.
Oh gosh, I was hoping this would be the year we could stop talking about it.
Well,
yeah.
It may
it's
be
the first of the next 25 annual
it.
years of the cryptocurrency boom, right?
Yeah.
So actually, I have an interesting take on that. There was a crash. There's FTX, which was kind of the poster boy. It was the big corporation that was doing cryptocurrency right, and come to find out, no, it was a pyramid scam and money laundering scheme. And the CEO has now been brought up on charges. And there's a lot of kind of fallout from that, and a lot of people wondering what's going to happen with crypto. It's like some of the shine has been knocked off of it. And then you've got Ethereum moved from proof of work to proof of stake, which I think is probably a good thing for cryptocurrency going forward. So, rather than burning billions and billions of CPU and GPU cycles, it's different. It's I forget exactly how it works, but it's like out of the pool of people that own it, 10 get chosen for each token to be minted.
Yeah, they don't do a competition; they do a contract.
And
I have to say,
just recently,
this year is last year was the year we learned that cryptocurrency was used primarily for scams and ransomware. I think, seriously, no, I'm serious.
Yeah.
I think that not only is the shine gone, but any sensible investor now knows it was purely speculative. And really the only thing it empowered were Ponzi schemes and ransomware attacks. Without that, ransomware would be a fraction of what it is if you still had to go down to the 7-Eleven and buy cash cards to pay off your ransomware. It wouldn't be a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'll give you another one. This whole blockchain thing, because people always say this to me. They say, well, yeah, cryptocurrency. Yeah, okay. But blockchain, or there's some underlying technologies that are great. Blockchain, and this audience understands this better than anybody else. It's just a Postgres, distributed. It's a distributed database. And somebody was, so big deal, right? And somebody was saying, yesterday we were talking about, I can't remember something. Password management. And they said, why don't we put it on blockchain? I said, what a great idea. Make everybody's passwords permanently public.
But encrypted.
Encrypted.
Yeah, right.
The only use case I've heard of at all for any of this is collectibles. That it's somehow you could have a immutable provenance for that Hannes Wagner card. Woo, changing the world. One baseball
Leo,
card at a time.
Blockchain has already changed the world. What do you think Git is? It's a distributed database.
But it's not blockchain. Yeah, no, Git's fantastic. And Git's exactly the right application. Everybody who has a Git repository has a copy of every change in the repository. Yeah. I think that's a good way to use it. It's not blockchain, though. I mean, I guess it's blockchain-like.
It's a Git chain or a block Git.
It's a distributed database. That's the way to do it. I think that's fine.
I know. But I wonder, respecting cryptocurrency, if we're at a moment right now that's a little bit like ancestors were when somebody says, clay isn't working anymore. We need to use metal and stamp it into circles, and nobody could agree on exactly what the circles ought to be. Like, are we going to have cryptocurrency? I mean, is cryptocurrency a permanent thing, even if it's just speculative at this point?
It's hard to say. So one of the other stories about this is Luke Dasher, one of the guys that is a Bitcoin developer, lost like 200 Bitcoins to a theft, all of his Bitcoins.
One of the original Bitcoin
he's not
guys.
Sure how.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he can't figure out how yet. They don't know how.
Well.
Oh.
Wow.
Boy, this is not the year of the Bitcoin death.
I am happy to be a Luddite in this regard, Doc. Sometimes the looms do have to be destroyed. And in this case, there will be digital currencies. Don't get me wrong. I think the reserve banks, the Federal Reserve Banks of many nations plan, there's the Luke story, to have digital currencies. There will be a digital dollar. But we're virtually digital as it is. When's the last time you pulled a dollar bill out of your wallet? Well, maybe Doc, you did. But you give quarters as tips like John D. Rockefeller. Here's a shiny dime, young man. Yeah. Don't spend it all in one place.
The hard place is with tip jars. Tip jars, you see the empty tip jar at the Starbucks, because
how do you
people aren't carrying cash anymore. It's kind of pathetic.
Yeah. Well, you could tip them in Venmo. Somebody, it's a good point because we have a tip jar on the TWiT site, and I got an email yesterday from a guy in Indonesia, actually was on the TWiT forums, on the discourse forums, who said, I can't give you any money. I said, this is PayPal's restriction. That's fine. You don't have to give us any money.
Yeah. If your intentions are good.
Your intention, the thought. It's the thought that counts.
It's the thought that counts. We'll put that in the bank. Yeah. Whatever that is.
I like the thoughts myself. Lisa wants cold hard cash to pay the light bill, but
let's put thoughts on the blockchain.
That's a good point, though. That Git is a block. It's a distributed database, though. See, it isn't blockchain technology, right, Jonathan? It's not the same. It's
so I say that a little bit of a troll, but at the same time, it's really pretty similar. If you take the idea of blockchain and you take the currency idea out of it, you essentially have Git. It's pretty similar.
And did Subversion I don't think it did, put a copy of every commit on your hard drive as well? I don't think so. I think that had a central database, I think.
I've avoided using Subversion as much as possible.
I can't remember. That's how long it's been since I used Subversion.
What's Subversion?
I don't remember how it works.
Yeah, Git is so far superior.
It's been Git full time for me.
That's actually an interesting open source story from the year gone by. Microsoft's, what should we call it? Kind of, I guess they've been taking care of it. Their stewardship of open source through Git and GitHub. We had for a long time thought, I think when they first bought GitHub, a lot of people said, "Oh, it's GitLab for me," or I'm gonna,
wash my hands of that.
I don't think that's, but I don't think that's the case, right? They've been a good steward.
Yeah, so far. There's been a couple of things that have happened that have made people worry. Like one of the big ones was they took down YouTube DL. And a lot of people went, "Oh, look, that's Microsoft being anti-open source."
Right.
No, that was a DMCA takedown, and
they backed down,
resolved, and back up. Yeah. I would agree. I think they've done a great job with GitHub, but also a lot of other open source projects that Microsoft supports. It's amazing. You go look at like the Linux kernel, the top 10 companies. Microsoft for years now has been in that top 10 list because they use Linux internally in a bunch of places. It's great.
Yeah, I have no problem with Microsoft and GitHub. I think they've done a great job. I think GitHub is still people. There was a lot of that talk of major projects jumping ship and hosting their own or going to GitLab or whatever. But it's still the place to develop open source software, and that hasn't changed. And I think that's an indication of their stewardship.
It's interesting. So one of the big issues is last year, and one of the reasons that crypto took off as a currency idea is decentralization. And I went to a big camp that put on by the Internet Archive this last summer on the decentralized web and wanting to decentralize everything. Of course, Mastodon is probably even the biggest story from this last year, an open source kind of alternative to Twitter.
Yeah.
And it's quite aside from the politics of everything that happened with Twitter getting owned by somebody, but I'm wondering whether what we're going to come up to are the limits of decentralization and the advantages of centralization. Because in a way, Microsoft being a steward of GitHub and GitHub being, although a distributed database, basically centralized in the sense that somebody runs it, is not a bad thing. It's a good thing. Brian Bellendorf, who I think we've had on the show, talks about minimum viable centralization. What is that? And I wonder whether that as an ethos is something that'll take off.
Love that phrase.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense because you can't have. So you've got GitHub, you've got GitLab. So there's these two different options. One is very centralized, the other is very decentralized. But even with GitLab, good luck making that work without, say, DNS. There's got to be some, everybody on board with the central idea to even make things work.
Although DNS is decentralized. Right?
Sort of.
You have your 13 canonical servers, but they're all over the world. They're highly protected. I would say that's an example of minimum viable centralization.
I was going to say, minimum. Yeah. Minimum, but no more.
But no more. And then everybody else is kind of responsible for maintaining their own, DNS cache, including you on your... you said I didn't do any prep, Doc, but actually, in my mind, I was thinking about centralization as being one of the big stories. What was the lesson we learned in 2022 was... big centralized social media sites are dangerous. We also learned this from LastPass. Centralized password storage is dangerous. I think 2022 was an important watershed moment for people who support open and decentralized solutions. And Mastodon's a very good example. We've had a Mastodon server for years. Before that, we had Identica and StatusNet, and we, since 2007, you had Evan Podromo on. We've used a variety of different ways of doing this, and I've really been a believer in this idea of Fediverse and federation. It really makes sense to me. But you're right; it's not as everybody goes to Twitter and says, "Well, look, everybody's here in one spot," but we see the downside of that as well. If it can be bought by a billionaire, I think it's a bad idea.
Speaking of Mastodon, I hope y'all aren't sick of talking about Mastodon, but is anybody else finding the Mastodon experience just, obviously in the last few months when the user base has grown tremendously, but are you all finding just the conversations there to be so much more thoughtful and deep and interesting, and it's like going back to the internet of 15 years ago. Is that just me, or is that everybody's experience?
100%.
It's not me. But I want to hold that thought.
You don't like Mastodon? All right. I'll fight you.
I love Mastodon.
Oh, okay.
And I love the two places I'm at in Mastodon, which is TWiT and the other. And
we have a very nice.
But trying to make it
perfect.
Trying to make it all work is a little bit of a chore for me. But I want to get into the topic. But first, we have to pause and let everybody know that this episode of Floss Weekly is brought to you by Fastmail. Free email isn't free. You pay with your privacy. For over 20 years, Fastmail has been a leader at email privacy. At Fastmail, your data stays yours with productivity features for as little as $3 a month. Fastmail prioritizes your privacy. Your personal data is kept safe and away from third parties with better spam filters and absolutely no ads. All Fastmail data is stored in the US, and Fastmail is fully GDPR compliant. Masked email protects your personal data by allowing you to create multiple addresses to use when you sign up for various websites. And privacy isn't all you get with Fastmail. You can customize your workflow with colors, custom swipes, night mode, and more. You can organize your inbox with scheduled send, snooze, folders, labels, search bar, and so on. Plus, keep track of all of the important details in your life easily with Fastmail's powerful sidebar. It gives you the ability to send and receive emails from your own domain and manage multiple email addresses in one space, which helps keep you organized and protects your personal data. Works with password managers like Bitwarden and 1Password to make it easy for you to create unique passwords for every account and safely store them on your device. It's great on desktop and mobile, especially when you download the Fastmail app to get the most out of your email. The Fastmail app is the best place to try all their newest features and will always be the most up-to-date. Fastmail has a US-based support team full of email experts that are always within reach to put you first. The Fastmail team believes in working for customers as people to be cared for, not products to be exploited. Advertisers are left out, putting you and your privacy at the center. Check out these reviews. One says, I used Fastmail because it's super fast and cares deeply about privacy and doing the right thing. Another says, Fastmail rocks. It's secure, private, independent, and has a Gmail transfer tool. You won't regret this move. Another says, I test drove several services, but settled on Fastmail years ago, and I couldn't be happier. I use it for my entire family, as well as a separate plan for my business. And don't worry about losing information. It's easy to download your old data and import it into your new Fastmail inbox. No need to leave important info behind when you switch. Fastmail is moving email forward with new internet standards and open source innovations that power many email services other than their own. Don't get left behind by substandard email providers. New year, new you, new email. Reclaim your privacy, boost productivity, and make email yours with Fastmail. Try it free for 30 days at fastmail.com/twit. That's fastmail.com/twit. Fastmail is also giving TWiT listeners a 15% discount on the first year when you sign up today.
Next time, let me do that one, Doc. I can do it in about 8 minutes. I
was saying before we started, here I am. I'm going to be reading ads in front of the best ad-libber of ads on earth.
Well, and in the case of Fastmail, I'm a user. Been a user for more than a decade, and I'm a huge fan.
So we have, what do we have coming up here?
This audience should use
Collide. You can do Collide.
Okay, I'll do them all. I'll do them all for you. Why should you have to do any ads?
I'm with you.
I'm the ad man. I'm the P.T. Barnum of podcasting. No, I was going to say Fastmail is great for geeks because, A, it's an open source IMAP server, Cyrus. They contribute back to the open source considerably. In fact, they've proposed a new, much better than DKIM and DMARC mail authentication standard, which I hope gets adopted. Fastmail is a big contributor to the open source community. Plus, you also get the open source Civ filters, and I have like hundreds of lines of Civ script filtering my email. You don't have to be geeky to use it, but if you're geeky, it's kind of like the Well. Do you remember the Well? Sure you do,
yeah.
Doc.
I was on the Well.
Yeah, the Well was very simple, text-based forums with threads. But if you, I can't remember what the command was, but there was a command to exit, and you could drop out of the well into the early, proto-internet, and use Gopher and Archie. You got a command line, and so that's what kind of Fastmail's like. On the surface, normal, but underneath,
you can go deep.
It's geeky goodness.
I think you could probably describe us all that way.
Yes, exactly. We seem normal. But don't ask us about Arch, because, it's all over.
Or Rust. In Jonathan's case.
Well, we have
do we want to talk about Rust
coming up? But let's stay on Mastodon for a minute, because
it's a good conversation.
It's a huge topic. I mean, you were asking, Katherine, do you have better conversations there? I think the conversations are better, and they're more like conversations. On the other hand, and I'll put this out there, there are several challenges for journalists and journalism in particular, especially going after the hand that feeds you for some of the major pubs that accept, that do tracking. I mean, the New Yorker, all the Condé Nast pubs, Wired, all of them, they track the living crap out of you. And they'll run ads, not ads, they'll run stories over and over again about here's what Facebook and Google are doing wrong. But unless you're protected and you open any one of those, your browser is getting filled with tracking beacons, and nobody wants to touch it. It's a third rail. So I've been, every so often I'll put something in the journo.host one, hoping to get a rise. And haven't seen anything yet.
That's the wrong place to do that.
Probably is.
Those are all corporate journalists. They don't have any.
Yeah.
There was a huge story broke yesterday that the Irish Republic, the Irish, and I like it too. The Irish Republic, the privacy guards there, have fined Facebook more than $400 million and forbid them from using your online activities to sell ads, which some interpret as a complete reversal. They're basically telling everybody, you can't track people and then use that to sell advertising. That's huge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was get a new business model.
Yeah. $400 million fine, 390 million euros is huge. Not a lot for Facebook, but it tells it's a flag in the sand saying, hey, you know what? You can't do this anymore.
There's somebody I spoke to recently who seems to know their stuff, said that basically Facebook and Google are just budgeting it in. They're budgeting it in. We're going to be paying big GDPR fines all over Europe, and that's just part of the cost of doing business. But being actually forbid from
isn't that interesting?
Yeah, that is interesting.
Yeah.
Like, this is outright against the law. You're not going to do that. Now, how do they find out? I mean, it's interesting. If you look at, say, a nuclear power plant or anything that's a public utility, and there are guys in, maybe it's just guys, but people in white coats with pocket protectors and degreed professionals that know what they're doing and go in there and inspect everything. You can't do that with an algorithm.
Well,
you can't get inside of Google or Facebook. And
remember back in the 90s when Microsoft made a deal with the DOJ, one of the parts of the DOJ deal was an ombudsman, an outside third party inside Microsoft watching what they did. So it's certainly doable. But even from the outside, all you have to do is go to Facebook and try to buy an ad based on 66-year-old men in Petaluma who have recently browsed stories about women's underwear, and boom, I show up. So, no, I'm kidding. But you could do that. You could verify whether they're, I think ProPublica and others have done that exact kind of, stealth research into Facebook. And they've demonstrated Facebook will sell ads against all kinds of information, which they clearly don't know from just what you've put on Facebook.
So Google has a gigantic back end that is the plumbing for much of the advertising FICO system that's tracking based. And
did you say fecal system?
I did. FICO system.
FICO scores, not fecal scores. Okay.
No. As in feces, as they say. I just try not to use the S word.
Reference.
It was. Okay.
Yeah, it's a scatological reference.
I'm new here. I didn't know. Okay, good. Okay.
But the so what if they forbid Google in particular, but if they're forbidding like your JRandom blog, and your ads are being placed by Google, and they're based on the tracking that's in your browser. Are they going to come after the whole plumbing system that's
well,
based on?
That's interesting. I wonder if the Irish regulator, I mean, that's what they imply, is that if you can't do it Facebook, no one is allowed to do it. And Google would be the biggest violator. They could be saying to Google, all that information you get from people's searches, that's private. Holy cow.
Yeah. Wow. Well, so
I wonder, though. I wonder.
Go ahead, Katherine. Sorry.
Well, I was going to say, I wonder, legislating things like that without the ability to truly enforce it, without the ability to go and look under Facebook's hood and verify that that's actually how things are working. I don't know. It strikes me as it reminds me of something else that I thought we might talk about. The year in security or something. But there are things like the Open Source Security Act, for example, that's out there. But it just strikes me as, okay, we can make these broad declarations using legislation or regulation and whatever, but it's almost like wishful thinking. It's like, well, we're going to just legislate security to into software, and that obviously doesn't work. So I kind of these things are similar in my mind, in that it's a nice gesture and it's a nice thought, but is there a lot of does it pack a punch? I guess is what I'm asking.
Did that pass, by the way, the Securing Open Source Software Act? I don't think so.
Yeah. I think it's still out there, and going through the.
Well, it's dead now because, of course, Congress has been.
Is it dead? Right. Yeah. Of course. Yeah. Nothing's gonna.
So it's gone. Well, there's just a new Congress, so they start over. I was going to submit as one of my prepared bits the notion that the fact that we've seen at least 2 or 3 Linux vulnerabilities emerge this past year is more further proof that Linux on the desktop has finally arrived, because the bad guys are going after it.
How many of those vulnerabilities are really desktop-oriented?
They're all server-focused. There were a couple of kernel errors, right, issues that you could use to go after desktops.
You could, yeah. I think most of those, though, were elevation of privilege. So, really somebody getting into it, it's still going to be, a vulnerability in Chrome. You pop Chrome and then you use one of these others to actually get to root.
Sounds bad to me.
But that's true. But I just don't know that there's a real line you can draw from any of these vulnerabilities to Linux on the desktop. But
you're right. When we see Linux ransomware, then we'll know.
Linux desktop ransomware. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Ransomware for Linux. It's not just we've got your website encrypted.
Actually, there is. I just did a Google search. There is Linux ransomware.
Oh, I'm sure, but it's it's encrypting your website.
Yeah, I mean, I think as more and more people use Linux backends. Look at Microsoft's actually embracing Linux. So Azure supports Linux as well as AWS, Google, the cloud.
Azure runs on Linux too.
The cloud is Linux based. I understand.
Yeah. So one of the stories I've been following this year, I think is really interesting, ties into that, is Valve, and we now have an open source and Linux based gaming console with the Steam Deck. And if you followed like gaming consoles for the last 10, 20 years, it's kind of mind-blowing to actually have one that is this popular. I think they've shipped 1 million units now. And it's open source. You can go install another distro on it if you want to. You can do pretty much whatever you want to with it, and it is incredible. So you talk about Linux on the desktop. Well, this may be another place where we have Linux on almost, but not quite the desktop. We've taken over servers, we've taken over phones. Now we're going to take over gaming consoles, which are really close to desktops, but not quite.
Well, there's an even bigger impact. I'm a Linux gamer, right? My gaming machine runs Linux. And because of all these games that have now been adapted to run on the Steam Deck, you have really good compatibility layers for Linux, like Proton, which means if there are very few PC games I can't play on my Linux desktop, and they run very well. We're even, this is new stuff, but it looks even like HDR is going to start coming to PC games on the Linux desktop. So it's huge for a Linux user. I mean, I'm playing there were so bunch of games that I thought, I can't play these, like Factorio and Satisfactory, and then I just installed them. And Steam, you install them with Steam with the compatibility layer. I think they're using Proton, and it just works, and it works great.
Yeah. Well, so two things going on there. Valve has been pushing money towards developers, open source developers. And then the other thing is, because the Steam Deck has taken off in popularity, you have a bunch of game creators now going, man, it would be nice if we could run on that. It would be another slice of the pie that we could get. So it's kind of a win all around.
Good for me.
Yes, good for us. Those of us that have desktops running Linux that we like to game on, it's kind of nice.
Well, and my game of the year for the last 2 years, Valheim, was developed on Linux and runs beautifully on Linux. So that's another thing I'd love to see, is more developers writing natively on Linux. That'd be great. And I think we're starting to see that. It's a good development platform.
Now, Leo, I've got to ask, what do you think? It's one of the things that people really predicted with Valve and Proton taking off is that we would see fewer games with native Linux ports because Proton just works so well.
Well,
do you think that's where we're at?
Yeah, that might be. I mean, the Valheim developers, actually, it's kind of interesting. Irongate chose Linux because they liked developing on Linux. And I think that's a very common point of view, right? I prefer to develop on Linux than, I guess the Mac could be number 2 because it's kind of Unixy. Windows has got to be a distant third unless you're writing .NET or Windows code. So if I'm a developer, I would choose Linux. I'm not a developer, but I play one on TV. Hey, try to install Emacs on Windows. Let me tell you, that is not a pleasant thing.
Isn't that kind of the point of WSL, though? WSL2 is...
Yeah, you can run Emacs under WSL, yeah. But why would you... Look, why? just put Linux on that machine, and you don't need to use that.
Isn't that what Microsoft is trying to do, though?
Yeah.
Isn't that their whole point? They're going, yes, it's easier to develop on Linux. People like doing it, but we want to keep people running on Windows on some regard.
Yeah.
So we'll give them WSL to be able to have the best of both worlds.
But really, it's not the best of both worlds. It's the worst of both worlds. If you want Linux, use Linux. You could dual boot, I guess, if you really had to have Windows.
So I'm wondering, in the back channel on our IRC, there's a suggestion, I'm not looking at it right now, that does Windows end up being another Linux desktop?
Well, I've wondered that, and I brought this up in Windows Weekly, only to be dismissed as a fool. But here, I feel I'm amongst friends. I really think Microsoft, in the long run, is going to see Windows as an albatross around their neck, that they, maintaining this ancient, ugly code base, maintaining legacy compatibility all along. I thought for sure that Microsoft would start moving users to cloud-based PCs by now. I mean, they offer it, but it's very expensive, so they're clearly still hoping to sell copies of Windows. But at some point, it's going to become more expensive to keep Windows running than it is to sell it, that they make from selling it. They're clearly a cloud company now, right? That's Satya Nadella's background. Azure is... I think they see that as their future. So why not? I mean, in a way, that's what Nadella said. It used to be that Microsoft's mission statement was a computer on every desktop running Microsoft software. They even had it on the sidewalk at the campus in Redmond, so you wouldn't forget. But it's changed. When Satya Nadella took over, he said, we want to be where the users are, and it doesn't have to be on Windows. And in fact, it was a big deal when they make Microsoft, the touch version of Microsoft Office, appear first on the iPad, not on their touchscreen Surface laptops. So I think it's in the future. I don't think it's the near future. But I think, Jonathan, you're absolutely right that Microsoft has no real attachment to Windows in the long run. Why not use that?
I don't think so either. It's interesting to put it in cost terms, that at a certain point, the economics are... What's the point? We're still selling something. I mean, this is what Neil Stephenson back in the last millennium wrote a great little book called "In the Beginning Was the Command Line."
I love this book.
Just a brilliant book, and it's all online. The whole thing's online. You can find it kicking around, or a number of copies of it. But basically, the whole idea of selling what was boxed software, is long gone now anyway. But they're still sort of selling it that way, and that you would have a laptop that comes with that little emblem on the bottom that says this runs Windows, but it could say Windows and it's still just a Linux front end. There's no reason it shouldn't be.
I can't remember what show it was. I did a reading of my favorite part of that book where, you remember this, Doc, he talks about the crossroads, and there's there are 4 car dealers. Yeah, car dealers at the crossroads. There's Microsoft, there's Apple, and then there's a bunch of guys
selling tanks. Yeah, giving
away tanks. And they can't understand why people are going across the street to buy these, crappy. Now, of course,
they did beat up old station wagons. Yeah, I mean, beat up new station wagons that fall apart and don't work. And
Stevenson has since amended it to say, "Hey, well, actually, it turns out Apple isn't that bad. Okay, Apple's fine."
Yeah, one of my few exchanges with him was about that. He said, I'm using a Mac now. Sorry, I kind of hate to admit it.
If you haven't read it, read it. It's
still worth reading. It mentions, what was Jean-Louis Gasset's company?
BOS. Yeah, this was
the BOS.
That dates it because it was written
that was the
when
other corner.
Yeah, it was written when BOS was still around, and he was right. I mean, that was an awesome operating system. That must have been the late '90s, early 2000s.
Late '90s. Yeah. Came along just in time for the .com crash.
In the beginning was the command line. Fantastic book. I actually bought a copy of it.
Were you there, Doc, when we changed Linux Journal to BOS Journal for April Fool's Day?
Oh, really?
We changed the whole site, everything.
So here's a question. Are we now stuck with iOS, Android, Mac, Linux, and Windows? Is that it? Will they not? I mean, are we done with new operating systems? BOS was pretty amazing. There is a kind of open source movement called Haiku to kind of keep it alive. There's Fuchsia from Google. But are we done with new operating systems? Is it set?
Well, that may be a piece with passwords, because if you told me in 1995, which is to me like the beginning of the internet, in the sense that it went commercial, the NSF-net shut down, suddenly there was this explosion of commercial activity where there were ISPs, and sort of we had the table of elements that we have now. But if you told me then we'd still be using passwords in 2023, I'd think you were nuts. And logins and passwords are like more embedded than ever. And I wonder whether it's the same way with operating systems. Like Apple's going to make its own. Apple's a multi-trillion-dollar company at this point, or something like that. Too many people in that ecosystem, too hard to see past the horizon of when that plays out, if it ever does.
I think there's a lesson in Windows Phone where Microsoft did try to create a third mobile operating system and was rebuffed, because I think this might be the case now. You can't really just put out an operating system unless you have software for it. So you've got to get developers lined up, and they couldn't, and they didn't, and it just flopped. They had to kill it. And I wonder if at this point the burden of creating an entirely new operating system, and then maybe you'd have to put in a compatibility layer so people could run their Windows software on it. Did BOS have? I don't remember. Did it have a compatibility layer? I don't think so.
I doubt it. I don't think it was. I don't think
it's pretty purist. It came with a lot of simple apps, so you could do some things. But
so Leo, do you want to handle the Collide ad, or should I stumble into it?
If you want.
Okay, go for it.
If you
Queuing
want.
you up.
All right, I will do the ad. I will do the ad for Collide. I should put on my Collide t-shirt while I'm doing the ad. Let me tell you, I am a huge fan of Collide because I really believe that security can be done better than, the old saying, when the only tool you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? The traditional approach to device security, that's the hammer. The MDM, a blunt instrument, not great with nuanced problems. It also creates this, wall between IT and security and your end users. They become the enemy. As even after installing those clunky, MDM agents that users hate, IT teams still have to deal with mountains of support tickets, same old issues, right? No way to address things like, go ahead and try telling a user, your SSH key's unencrypted, huh? Or you got to update your operating system, dude, or pretty much anything going on with a Linux device. Endpoint security done right. That's Collide. And it's not a hammer. It's a Swiss Army knife. It gives your IT teams a single dashboard for all devices. That's one of the things I love about Collide. Totally cross-platform, Mac, Windows, yes, Linux. And for the IT guys and gals, you can query your entire fleet to check for common compliance issues. Just one command, or you can write your own custom checks, easy to do. Plus, instead of installing in some intrusive MDM software that creates more work for you, the IT department, and scares your users over privacy, Collide's lightweight agent shows end users, I love this, how to fix the problem themselves. And there's two reasons. It's not laziness on your part. It's when they do it themselves, they have ownership. It's the IKEA effect, right? They've fixed it. They are now on your team. They're there to keep your entire network secure, your entire enterprise secure. They're part of the team instead of the enemy. And users love it. I'm telling you, you will love it. Achieve endpoint compliance. Add a new tool to your toolbox. Visit Collide.com/floss to find out how you can start that 14-day free trial right now. No credit card required. Collide with a K, KOLIDE.com/floss. We love Collide. And see all the goodies you can get. Your Collide t-shirt, the coaster for, I think Jonathan could use that. The stickers for Katherine to put on her laptop. KOLIDE.com/floss. Thank you, Collide, for supporting Floss Weekly.
So speaking of advertisers, there's news around one we don't have now, which is LastPass.
Yes. Steve Gibson, I'm going to plug for Security Now yesterday. Steve Gibson did a whole, he got us all on LastPass when he interviewed the creator, Joe Segrist, and said, thumbs up, the way he's doing is perfect. This was 2007, 8, something like that. Mm-hmm. And then he's been reporting on the breaches, the first one in July, which LastPass undersold. His podcast from yesterday, Security Now from yesterday, is called Leaving LastPass. And I'll leave you to decide what his final conclusion is.
That was my holiday, so that title was basically my.
I bet a lot of people. Yeah. And one of the things,
how did it hit you, Katherine? What was? Well,
I mean, I haven't been impacted in the true sense, but I just lost faith after the first one. I thought, well, I've been using LastPass for forever. I mean, I don't know if it goes back as far as we just said, but it's been a long, long time. And it's really, it's tough to migrate off of something like that. But this last time I thought, I actually, I have to say that this is a sponsor before I mention the name, I believe. But I created a new account with Bitwarden.
Yes.
Because I've heard great things about Bitwarden for a very long time, and I intended to migrate there at some point.
And it's open source. This
was the last straw, and it's open source. Mm-hmm. And I just feel better about using it. So I created a new account, and all my, let's say my more important stuff, or at least the more important stuff that I'm willing to put in a password manager is there. And, eventually I'll probably migrate the whole thing, but I still have some things in LastPass. But it's just, it's a bummer because you hate to be let down. And when you have that sort of crisis of confidence with a brand that you've used for so long, it is a bit sad. But Bitwarden's great. So
they went through, they got purchased a couple of times, sold a couple of times, logged me in, bought them. I thought that's maybe a sign of trouble, but I was actually impressed. They let the team, stay intact, and they continue to do good work. Then they were purchased by a private equity company, and always that's nerve-wracking. That happened a couple of years ago. That they stopped advertising before that happened, or maybe at the same time. And then the private equity company spun it out as a standalone company, just I think a couple of months ago. So, but the problem is, especially with private equity, you get so profit-focused, and I don't know. I don't have any sources on the inside, but it's my guess that the people running the company started to become more important than the people writing the software and the security experts. And so they made some, I think, poor decisions. The worst decision was what they've told people, which has been barely adequate. I think the legal minimum that they could tell people. But the impression we got is that all of the password vaults were leaked. And that is the worst thing a password manager can do, right?
Yeah.
And because many of these vaults were not as secure as they ought to be, they use something called PBKDF2, and the iterations. The more iterations, the harder it is to brute force. LastPass chose 100,001 iterations some years ago, but Steve seems to have figured out that that wasn't done retroactively to everybody's account. So there are people out there who with LastPass vaults that are secured with 5,000 PBKDF2 iterations, and that's far too few for modern GPU brute forcing tools. So those vaults are vulnerable. If you used a bad password, they're vulnerable. I said, is it helpful if I use two-factor? He said, no, because the two-factor is only used when you log into your LastPass account. It is not used to secure the vault, so that doesn't help. So you better hope you had a very long, strong master password. And then if you did like Katherine did, and as Steve has done, he moved to Bitwarden as well after looking at all the others. Although I will say that, there's nothing wrong with 1Password. Nothing wrong with Dashlane. There are other good choices. If you're on a Mac only, you can use the Mac Apple built-in stuff, the keychain. Those all work. But better any password manager, including LastPass, than no password manager. But one thing he did point out, and I think is important, Katherine, for you to know, is even though you have now moved to Bitwarden, that old LastPass vault is sitting out there. Somebody's attacking it. Yep. All those passwords may at some time become available to them. So you want to start with anything that's important financially, or you can't afford to lose that password, and go change those all. If you have two-factor turned on, your less two-factor will help protect you, because password alone won't get them into your bank account. But still, yeah. And that's what'll take you all Christmas. That's a lot of
it was miserable. I had so many passwords. So I was changing passwords and and prioritizing and deciding, if somebody logs into my Pinterest account or I don't know, things that are lower priority I've put off a bit. But it's not a fun process. But you got to do what you got to do.
Philly Cotown in the IRC has it right. He says you had one job, LastPass.
Yeah.
Well, I've got to say, though, this is not the worst thing that could happen to a password manager. I have to give credit to Tavis Ormandy over at Google for making this point. The worst thing that could have happened to LastPass is they could have accidentally shipped an update to the browser extension with malicious code.
Yeah. Tavis has been saying this for some time, that you shouldn't use those browser extensions. Yeah.
He wants you to use. That would have been the nightmare scenario where they would have actually, an attacker would have gotten everyone's master password as well. Right. And then it would have been game over.
Yeah, you really have to make sure that, and he says you shouldn't be using you should be, frankly, he thinks you should use Google Chrome's password manager, which I kind of disagree with. For a long time, Google Chrome's kept the password in plain text. Their logic was, if somebody has access to your computer, you're out of luck anyway. But I don't think they do now encrypt at rest.
So I want to hear this right. What you're suggesting is, like, if you with Dashlane or 1Password or any of those, they all have a browser extension that you could use to generate a password.
And Tavis says that's dangerous. Yeah.
So basically, don't do that.
I do. You're trusting though that they won't, somebody doesn't come along and inject malicious code into it, because it has access to everything in the clear. Mm-hmm. Tavis said has been pretty aggressive about that. I'm not sure I fully agree with him, because I think we want people to use these tools.
Mm-hmm. You want people to use the tools, Jonathan, but the attack he describes is absolutely a real thing.
Sure.
The idea that
hasn't
if
happened.
A malicious update happened.
Right. Hasn't happened.
It would steal your master password. But I don't think it's happened anywhere. No. Any of the password managers that use actual real encryption, I don't think any of them have fallen into that.
The other thing, though, that may be of advantage of Bitwarden is you can store your own vault. And for a long time, I said, oh, no, I'm going to let the companies do it because they're experts in security. They'll never let my vault. So now, but it is a single point of failure, right? If somebody can get into those vaults, that's a single point of failure. So I think that's another thing you might consider if you know what you're doing, is store your Bitwarden vault on Dropbox. Or you don't have to run a Bitwarden server, but you could even do that. There's actually some good third-party servers. But just, not having your vault in the big blob of everybody else's vaults is some advantage as well.
So Jonathan, what do you use right now for passwords? We know what the rest of us are using.
Well,
you have piles of paper, right? That are
I have so far actually followed Tavis's advice. So I use LastPass for old passwords, and most of the new stuff is actually in Google Chrome, which I do recognize that that's a potential problem. I will say, though, the really important stuff doesn't touch a password manager. Like the passwords I really care about that could be a nightmare if somebody got a hold of, those aren't in any password manager.
You can put, I think, on the current YubiKeys, something like 15 or 25 passwords on those, on some of them, the FIDO2 capable ones. So the really important stuff you could keep on a physical key. I think that would be clearly the best way to do it. I keep a YubiKey on my keychain. And every time I do this, by the way, I get an email from somebody who said, they could take a picture of your keys and then get into your house. I said, I know. I'm trusting that you're not going to do that. But I love YubiKeys. And YubiKey has said that they're going to,
love YubiKey.
Yeah, they're going to do, and I hope this is soon, they're going to do a YubiKey that will store more passwords. Then this would be a great password manager, right? You'd have to have you'd have to rip it from my cold dead fingers.
Yeah. So at that point, it's become an HSM, a hardware security module.
Exactly.
And if they've done everything right, even if somebody gets a hold of it,
right,
there should be some second authentication step to be able to pull passwords off of that. I assume.
Right. Yeah.
So that's a really a promising approach. I'm going to have to look into that.
There are open source hardware keys like YubiKey. I've purchased several of them. YubiKey is not open source, so for some people they go, well, I don't know if I trust them, but there are open source ones out there. I can't remember.
Do any of the open source ones have any true physical hardening though?
Well, that's the question. Yeah.
I've looked into several of those, and it seems like they don't have the. So there are certain physical attacks that you could do on a hardware security module, and then there are approaches that people have taken when they actually build the chips to make those difficult, like someone trying to probe the inside of a chip. If they hit the wrong wire, it erases everything.
Yeah.
To put it very simply. And the open source HSMs that I've looked at, they've not had the money to be able to physically design the chips.
Yeah, because you have to do your own VLSI, and that's the problem. I've used, I think I used a solo key. A Nitro key, I think, is the one I used most recently.
Yeah, Nitro key.
Yeah. But that's a really good question. Is the hardware hardened?
Yeah,
I like YubiKey. I trust them, and even though it's not open source, I think it's a good solution.
Yeah. Well, with all of those, you got to have to think through.
Yeah.
I was just going to say,
we're getting down to the short rows here, so. And we haven't touched Rust, and we haven't touched System 76. Another thing was on our list here. Anything we want to hit real quickly before we go out? And we need to plug the TWiT survey. Maybe you could do that, Leo.
Yeah, take the TWiT survey. twit.tv/survey23. It only takes a few minutes, and it helps us better understand you, the audience. Actually, last year, there was a little error made. We didn't mention Linux as one of the operating systems people use. No. And boy, we heard about that. So Linux is now a choice. There are other changes I would have made, but I don't have control over this. So, but it is really helpful for us. We'd only do it once a year. We don't want to track you. We can't really with RSS. So, which is the way podcasts work. And let's keep it that way. Darn you, Spotify. But if you take the survey, it helps us. Yes, we'll say that with advertisers because we can say, well, age, demographics, so forth like that. But of course, it's not about you. It's about, as in general, young, smart people with lots of disposable income. Listen to FLOSS Weekly. We like to be able to say that. So if you would go to twit.tv/survey23, just do it quickly. It won't take long. And thanks in advance. It runs, I shouldn't say this, but you have till the end of the month. But don't do it now. Just get it over with. It gets a good feeling.
We need to know you, know who we have.
Not you specifically, but you in general.
The plural you, whatever.
I fight really hard. Advertisers would love to do all sorts of tracking. We have had to give in a little bit in a way that I think is privacy forward to some of them because they just, they won't advertise. And it's getting worse and worse. And that's primarily because of Spotify, Amazon, and Audible, and Microsoft and iHeart, all of which take these podcasts, put them inside an app where they know exactly who you are, what your credit card number is, where you are right now, how much of the show you listen to, how many times you heard the ad, all of that stuff. Advertisers, rightly or wrongly, love that. And so it gets very hard for us to sell against those platforms. The survey helps, but it's one of the reasons we also really promote Club TWiT, because I think ultimately this is going to be a real problem for podcasts done in the right way with RSS. The way we do it, independent podcasters are, I think, on the endangered list, and we would like to stay off that. So that's another plug, twit.tv/clubtwit, $7 a month, and it keeps us off the endangered list. Thanks for that too. Yeah.
That's a really critical thing. That
it's a big change, and it's not good. Same thing happened to blogs, right, Doc? It's
what's happened to blogs. It's what, Katherine and I have a Substack thing. And Substack is sort of like becoming the non-blog blog. Nothing against them, nothing against newsletters that made it rather easy to write. But it's I don't think blogs ever go away, but we're at a moment right now where I think we can bring them back. I think we can save podcasting. I think RSS is so critical for that. RSS has never gone away. Look up RSS on Google. You get about 20 million, billion results. It's kind of crazy. RSS is the way the open web is syndicated, and everybody trying to lock it into something. Oh my gosh! Well, I understand why advertisers want to know.
Natural, yeah.
So, they want to. Quite frankly, when I go to some podcasts, they do hit go 30 seconds forward, whatever, But with the way you do ads,
because you never know
I don't
what's
going
to happen. Leo might fall off his chair. You don't know.
Yeah.
I try to keep them exciting. Hey, you said Rust. I just want to say one thing. I'm glad Rust is in the Linux kernel now. I think Rust is, it's nice to have a memory-safe systems language. But I sure wouldn't want to write anything in Rust. Are you guys Rust users?
No, I don't.
It's a lot of boilerplate. It's like Java to me. It's too much typing.
It is definitely on my list of languages to take a look at and learn. You've seen the thing that I've seen is a whole bunch of projects getting re-implemented in Rust.
Great.
We do the command line tip over on the Untitled Linux show, and it hardly goes a week that we don't mention a command line tip and somebody goes, "Oh, here's the Rust version of it."
Yeah.
Goodness.
And I would always rather use the Rust version. Absolutely. But as a programmer, I would much rather write in Lisp. So I'm just a little plug for Common Lisp. Or, you can use a variant like a Clojure. That's fantastic. Haskell if you're crazy. A lot of people like Scheme. I think Racket's a very good choice. These are languages that have stood the test of time. Common Lisp hasn't changed since 1984.
I know, everybody loves it.
That's a great feature.
There it is. Yeah.
Are you kidding? Just ask a Python user. Well, is it Python 2 or 3? Are you?
That's true.
Or ask a Perl user. What's Raku? Have you moved to Raku yet? No, it hasn't changed. The Common Lisp standard has been a standard for 30 plus years, and I like using a language that's as old as I am. There you go. There you go. Thank you. Ant's putting up a picture from a site I never heard of, but it's good. It's good. Learn Lisp, kids. Your grandchildren will thank you when they're running your command line utility.
All the smart old people love Lisp. That's pretty much the story is,
One of the coolest Rust projects that I'm excited about, I want to plug this real quick before we go, is System 76 and their Cosmic Desktop.
Yes.
They are rewriting their own desktop environment in Rust.
Bravo.
And they've made some big promises about what it's going to do.
Is it out there? Have you used it? Can you use it?
It's not usable yet. They're still working on it. They're kind of they're in cathedral mode. If you want to talk cathedral and bazaar, they're still in cathedral mode where they're working on it.
Yeah.
And they haven't pushed it out yet.
Yeah.
But I'm excited because there's some big promises coming, and System 76 has a track record of actually delivering on their promises.
I own many of their desktops. I think Pop! OS is a very, very good version of Linux.
Maybe that should be called monastic mode. They're still in the monastery.
Yeah, monastery, then cathedral, then bazaar, and then the crossroads selling tanks. Yeah,
you can. It's in the liturgy. You can go there and hear them singing. Okay, well, this has been. We're actually gone long, but that's okay.
You have any more ads you want me to do?
I know you already did the last one, which is the survey.
Okay.
So
we're set. We're good.
I just want you to come on the show every week and do this because it's so freaking well.
This is something I don't have to do if you all join Club TWiT right now, please.
Right. Okay, so next week we have Devin Ulibarri and Walter Bender of Sugar Labs and Music Blocks. Our guest host is going to be Dan Lynch.
I love the music stuff you guys have been doing. That's so great.
Yeah, and he always has a guitar or instruments behind him. So,
nice.
And he's in Liverpool, so it all kind of plays out.
Maybe he'll play his latest record.
He might.
A little number I've written.
Find out. Maybe he'll noodle on it a little bit before we.
But I want to thank you, Doc, for taking over the show, and you and Jonathan and Katherine and Sean have done such a great job. This show is better and better all the time. You get the best people on. And I really hope that the open source world acknowledges and understands what a valuable resource this is. And you have my commitment that we will keep doing this because it's so important. This is a labor of love. And Jonathan, the Untitled Linux Show, which is a Club TWiT only, thank you for doing that. People have told us for years, you got to do a Linux show. I'm so glad you do that. It's really important. You and Rob and everybody. And thank you. And I'm sorry I kind of stopped doing it, but I was trying to get Saturdays off. I finally succeeded.
You deserve it. You deserve it.
I just want to go to brunch, please. 19 brunchless years. But thank you for the job all of you do. Really fantastic. And to get these great people on is to me is the gold of what podcasting can do.
Yeah,
Thanks
right.
for having me.
So so we're plugging the heck out of this show. So Jonathan, we already had the Untitled Linux Show, but go ahead and plug it again. Maybe you've got something coming up, and Hackaday. Do your thing.
Sure. So the two things I like to plug are the Untitled Linux Show, which we are adding video to that, which is kind of the big deal we've been working on this last couple of weeks.
And you're going to still do it on Saturday afternoons? You're going to still do the same time? Because the GizFizz is gone now. So you could change times if you wanted to.
That is good to know.
Yeah.
We'll keep it the same for now, but good to know we have a little flexibility with that. We may go, I don't know. I do it right after supper, so I can't really go much earlier unless we go way earlier.
And I'll do it right after brunch. I'll have to stop by.
Yeah, we would love to have you.
I might be a little woozy on mimosas, but it's okay.
That's fun, Leo.
Sounds like a good show.
And then the other thing I like to plug, Hackaday.com, where I have the security column over there on every Friday morning. Those are my two things.
Oh, so good. So good. I would like to plug your Hackaday column too. It's great.
Hackaday is a great site. Really, really fantastic.
Yeah, Jonathan rocks. So, Katherine, you going to just plug our little thing? Or
have anything
else?
really to plug? Oh, yeah. We do that other thing. Doc and I have another podcast we do at reality2cast.com. I also, hey, it's on the screen. You can find me at open.intel.com. I don't know. Did I mention I work for Intel? In our open ecosystem group. I have some stuff coming up. You might see maybe a podcast series there coming up too. All podcasts all the time. But yeah, visit me anywhere on the internet, Mastodon in particular. Yeah, you can find me there.
We didn't talk about RISC-V, but I'm very excited. I think this might be the year of RISC-V.
We've had a couple of shows on RISC-V.
I know.
Good stuff.
We should probably bring one
ideally
back.
Here in another month or two, I'm getting a RISC-V development board in. That'll be my first time to touch it, so I'm looking forward to that.
That's exciting. Yeah.
Fun. Okay, everybody, this has been awesome. This has been a fabulous show, an awful lot of fun, and to me, do it on almost no sleep.
Best ads ever.
Yeah,
best ads I've never done. It's just.
I'm sold. I'm seriously. I'm gonna go off. I'm gonna sign up for Collide.
Get Fast Mail, get Collide. You should do it all.
I feel like we have front row seats to just hear the master at work.
It's a lousy thing to be a master of, I gotta tell you. If I could pick anything in the world, I'd rather be a great unicyclist. But okay, all right. Master of ad reads, great. That'll be on my tombstone.
he can sell it.
There are worse things.
I'm the Ed McMahon of podcasting.
Oh boy. So more than that, the Johnny Carson, only Ed did the ads.
Only Ed did the Alpo ads, and yeah.
Johnny just sat there and smoked.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
And has the death to prove it. Anyway, all right, everybody, it's been great having you. See you in a week. Gave the plug for that already. We'll be back next time.
Hey, I'm Rod Pyle, editor-in-chief of Ad Astra Magazine, and each week I join with my co-host to bring you This Week in Space, the latest and greatest news from the final frontier. We talk to NASA chiefs, space scientists, engineers, educators, and artists, and sometimes we just shoot the breeze over what's hot and what's not in space, books, and TV. And we do it all for you, our fellow true believers. So whether you're an armchair adventurer or waiting for your turn to grab a slot in Elon's Mars rocket, join us on This Week in Space and be part of the greatest adventure of all time.